With Miller Mott College's online programs, you can choose when you study. Our online programs give you the flexibility to make education work with your schedule. Earn your degree without derailing your life. Visit us online at miller-mott.edu. That's miller-mott.edu.
Welcome to Bite Size Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bite Size Bios. This is number 26 here. We'll be covering Madeline Albright. This was the first of the full week-long Bite Size Bios, and it really did give me more time to do more research. I watched a lot of interviews about Madeline Albright before this, and it's just something I wouldn't have had the time to do if I was putting out 2 episodes a week like we were doing before. So I really think I hope it makes for a better episode. I guess we'll see as time goes on. But of course, before we get there, this is the mini episode for How Did That Happen? So we have to go back to the previous episode and talk about all the different stuff that we may have missed or learned. There wasn't much, I think, that really wasn't mentioned, I think, in the last episode. Let me see if I can pull actually the last episode back up. Want to talk about anything specifically? We did talk about Old Blue Dog. I hope you guys like that addition to the episode format. There will definitely be another story coming up next week, but I'm kind of settling on right now. The idea of it is I think I'll just think of some crazy phrases in my mind, and maybe if you want to submit a crazy phrase or something like that, I'm just going to start searching it, right, and see what stories, because what happens when you put the phrase in, you search it, it comes up with all the newspapers that have any of those words in them. So I have to then look at these newspapers and read the newspapers to see what is worth talking about, basically. But I think, I wouldn't have found Blue Dog without it, and I wondered, what do y'all think? Because what got me about that story was really the fact that I just thought there was going to be more to it. Like, it was a long story. And then you get to the end, and I'm like, I'm sorry? Like, can someone you got to lay it out for me. I need you to just lay it out. I need to hear that he brought them back alive, or that this man actually has like real supernatural powers. I need one or the other. Don't just end the story. I don't like that. But yeah, so that we talked about that in the last episode. We talked about a number of different symbols. So we talked about the peace sign, the @ symbol, which could be the address sign. We talked about the hashtag, and we talked about the money sign. I'm not sure which one you guys found to be the most appealing. I thought we also talked about the ampersand, I believe, as well. I think the dollar sign to me was the most interesting, only because we still don't really know where it came from. People had a bunch of different ideas, and that to me is there's a little bit of there's a little bit of mystery, a little mystique there. You think, well, who made it? You know what I mean? Like, it's everywhere. It's everywhere in the world now, and nobody knows where it came from. I mean, everyone has their idea. I think I literally read you 3 different ideas of where it could have come from. And the fact that it's been around for, 500 years, and we still are just like, well, there's a 30% chance it was this, a 30% chance it was that. You would think that somebody would have the concrete, evidence, but what you realize with most things in the world that are that old, everybody who ever made it is dead. And all their kids, dead. Their kids, dead. So, we don't have... I think we'll probably have the most, if you look at it, the most recorded information from the current times we're living in right now, where everything is documented. Everything is documented. I think about that when I watch YouTube videos, or just videos you see on Twitter or whatever, and you're just seeing people do crazy stuff. Like, I watched the other day, these kids are just jumping from balcony to balcony on a 30-foot building, just 10-year-olds. And you're like, oh, the world must be messed up. These kids are doing this now, whatever. It's like, no, kids were always doing crazy stuff. It's just now we have video. Now we have video proof. We just, I don't know. I kind of got on a tangent about that, but that was last week's episode. Not sure there's much else to mention about that. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys are enjoying the new format. I'm trying to get this to be something that is worth people's time. I really am. And that's like I said, one of the reasons I changed the format is I didn't feel like I was putting enough information into what I was doing. And I think the next episode that we have, the next How Did That Happen, should be really informative. And it's something that I've always wanted to know about. I'm still keeping them under wraps, because I feel like the idea, if I tell you what I'm about to tell you next week, what's to stop you from just going and looking it up yourself? And there's no reason for you to come back and listen to me week to week. So I definitely gonna have something interesting next week, but I can't tell you right now. So before we get on to the actual podcast, I have started to put the what am I watching and what am I listening to in this part as well, since we've gone week to week. So it's, it would have been every 2 weeks we'd hear about that. So now we're just actually going to do it every episode during the housekeeping. So what am I watching this week? I just watched the Waco doc on Netflix. Definitely, it was really good. I hope you guys check that out. I've watched a lot of documentaries on that before, but I would say this by far was probably the best one. It was the most informative. They had some great interviews in there. I always wonder how Netflix gets it done, because they just find people that either they find people that have never been interviewed before about this topic, or they ask them questions that they've never answered before. I mean, there was one lady on there, and I've talked to multiple people I thought it was just me. because I was laughing so hard, kind of, when she was talking, but it was just like, this woman still believed in the cause. And she never said it explicitly, but she spoke from a way that was like, oh, you're still going to the meetings. Like, oh, you're still drinking the Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? It's like, someone frisk her before she comes in and when she leaves, because I don't know what's going on. She went to jail for a long time for this. You come out still spouting that stuff, dude is dead. They all burned. But yeah, definitely check it out. Something that you probably want to. Oh wait, hold on. You know what I'm realizing? I just did a snafu. I'm reading the what am I watching from the previous. How did that happen? Oh my gosh. I'm gonna leave it in there because I like to keep it real. I'm gonna go back to because I was reading through the old episode outline. That's what it was. So you guys definitely check that out, please, because it's a pretty good documentary. But what am I watching right now? Like the new. I'm in the right podcast outline text right now. I'm watching The Copycat Killer on Netflix. It's really good. It's a Korean crime drama. Love the way that it's shot. It's set in the late 90s in South Korea, and it follows a very skilled prosecutor who was trying to solve a series of murders that are both old, and then there are some new ones as well. Basically, there's a series of murders where this guy killed people in a certain way, and now all of a sudden, more people are being killed in the same way as they were. But the guy who did it is in jail, so it's like, oh my God, who's doing it now? The copycat killer. Well, I'm not gonna spoiler alert, so no. But check it out. It is dubbed. If you're not into that, but they do it pretty well. Definitely, I think it's worth your time. What am I listening to? I just found, and this is kind of fun for me, as someone who listens to podcasts and watches podcasts all the time. I mean, legit, I think if there was like a podcast TV network, I'd probably just pay for that. I don't even think I would watch anything else. But found a new one. It's called Take Off Your Shoes, or Take Your Shoes Off with Rick Glassman. Rick Glassman, he's a comedian. I've always been aware of him. I never knew about his podcast, but I first watched it for the first time, I think it was last week. Glassman, he's a comedian who I've seen a lot on a lot of different podcasts, but never actually watched his before. And they do a lot of different stuff with editing that's just like, it's so free in the way they do it that it's just, I would recommend just watching it. I'm not saying you have to pick it up and put it in your rotation, but it's worth a watch. This just, I mean, even to the simple, like when people are drinking their drinks, like I think it says, like there's a voiceover that just says it's like gulp, 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 gulp. Like, you know what I mean? It's just fun stuff that just happens during the podcast. Kind of makes things, kind of just catches your brain off guard. So I think if you're looking for something to kind of break the monotony up, I would suggest Take Your Shoes Off with Rick Glassman. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, definitely check it out. But I don't think there's much else to say before we get to the actual part. These are the bite-sized bios. Try to keep it pretty bite-sized. Yeah, I think before I start to ramble, we'll get on to it. So without further ado, as we know to do, here is the episode.
There was a very small group of Democrats. I was one of them. We went into town to raise money for the Democrats, dollars for Democrats. Wow. And I started my fundraising life by the following remark. I was in Boston, and this crusty old man came up and said, $5 for you, baby, but not $1 for the Democrats. Wow.
So today, we are going to talk about Madeline Albright, Secretary Albright. She was the first female Secretary of State in the history of the United States of America. And this may not seem important now that there has been a female vice president. But in 1997, when she was confirmed as Secretary of State, it meant that for the first time in the history of the country, a female was third in line of succession to the presidency. People may not know that, and some of you may know that. The Secretary of State is basically the next person. If the president goes down, the vice president goes down, we go to the Secretary of State. And never before, until she was confirmed, had there been a female one. So, and she has a pretty interesting story. She was a refugee, and we're gonna get into all that. Yeah. So Madeline Albright was initially named Maria Jana Korbalova, and Maria Jana basically just it means MJ, like Mary Jane, like marijuana. Basically, that was her initially her name. She would go on to be called Madeline because her grandmother was a very big fan of a Czech play that was playing at the time called Madeline and the Brick Factory. That's kind of where she ended up getting the name Madeline. Is what she said in an interview. No one had ever. I didn't see it in any articles, but I watched an interview about her, and she mentioned that she was born on May the 15th, 1937, in the Smykov district of Prague, Czechoslovakia. Her parents were named Joseph Korbel and Anna Korbel. At the time of Albright's birth, Czechoslovakia had been independent for less than 20 years after they had gained independence from Austria-Hungary after World War I. They had a very trying effort during this time. It was hard for their family. They went through a lot. Her parents, Joseph and Anna, converted from Judaism to Catholicism in 1941, which meant that Madeline and her siblings were all raised Catholic. She would not find out until literally the year she was confirmed as Secretary of State that she was Jewish. And that actually, 26 members of her family had died in the Holocaust. A lot of people said that, this doesn't seem real. You had to have known at some point. And I mean, I'll honestly say, based off the interviews that I heard, it almost sounded like she did know. And only because just the way she described it, only because the way she was talking about it, it was because I was watching a C-SPAN interview where she was being interviewed about her book that was coming out. This was like 15 years ago or something like that. And the guy asked her about that, people say they're not sure whether or not, they just kept this a secret for all these years. And she said her response was, in my childhood, I thought it was better not to ask. And I'm just like, that's not the same thing as not knowing. That's not the same thing. Like, you know what I mean? If there's something that you don't know in your family, you don't know it. You don't know to not ask about it. Like, let's say if your family's in the mafia or whatever, right? You just don't ask because you see it. It's obviously there. Or if they're not in the mafia, then they're not in the mafia. So you don't know anything. You don't know whether to ask whether they are in the mafia. Just the fact that she said that, the way she said it, just made it feel like I was like, oh, that's not how I would answer that question. But so her family converted to Catholicism in 1941. A bunch of her family died in the Holocaust. She wouldn't find out about that for another 30 or 40 years. Her family fled Czechoslovakia, wouldn't become the Czech Republic for later, and they would come to America, but they would stop at a couple different spots. Before then, they would end up being in London for a little while. They left Czech the first time. They actually left Czech twice, it seems. They left the first time because of Nazi troops when they invaded in 1939, and they came back, and then they left again when the Soviets tried to overthrow the Czechoslovakian government in 1948. So it was really like she was really a refugee twice, if you look at it. The family would actually live in Switzerland for a little bit before they would continue to make their trek west. Madeline would learn to speak French while she was in Switzerland. And this is really where she becomes to be more known as Madeline as opposed to Mary Jana. Wouldn't that be funny if our first Secretary of State's name was Mary Jane? I mean, technically it is. That was her first name. But yeah, their family came over. The Korbel family came over to America on the SS America. In 1948, they showed up at Ellis Island. They were initially in Long Island for a little while. Her father applied for political asylum, saying that it was, he couldn't go back to Prague due to communism. He would end up being settled in the university in Denver. That's where the family would spend a lot of time. He became a professor at the University of Denver in the political science department. He became dean of the University of the University's School of International Relations. And interestingly enough, I think we mentioned this in Condoleezza's bite-sized bio. He would actually be her professor. He would be Condoleezza Rice's professor while she was in college at the University of Denver. So Condoleezza Rice was the first black female Secretary of State, and this, his daughter, Joseph Korbel's daughter, was the first female Secretary of State. It's really interesting when you look at all the different. You don't think about the Secretary of State of some people may, but the history of them and who has held that position. But they're pretty successful and pretty interesting people. But as I stated, Madeline spent her time in Denver growing up. She graduated in 1955 from the Kent-Denver School in Cherry Hills Village, which is a suburb of Denver. Big thing that she always mentions is that wherever she went, she set up an international relations club. Wherever she was at, 'cause she liked the idea of all the different minglings of all the different nations, and that would be one of her main jobs before she became Secretary of State. She'd be ambassador to the UN, which is basically just the same thing, just on a larger scale. And once she graduated from high school in 1955, she would go to Wellesley in Wellesley, Massachusetts, on a full scholarship, majoring in political science. She would graduate in 1959. She wrote for the school paper while she was there, and said that she actually wanted to be a journalist, but because once she graduated, she married a guy who, we have the quote here. I'll actually let her explain it a little bit better than me.
But I was going to be a journalist, and I spent some time at a small newspaper in Missouri getting ready, and then we moved back to Chicago, and we were having dinner with Joe's managing editor, and he looks at me and he said, "So what are you going to do, honey?" I said, "I'm going to work on a newspaper," and he said, "I don't think so. Because labor regulations don't allow that." And even though there were 3 other papers in Chicago at the time, he said, "And you wouldn't want to compete with your husband, so go do something else."
I mean, wow, that guy really kind of laid it down to her, told her she's not doing that. But so yeah, she would go on to marry a man named Joseph Albright, who was part of a very famous publishing kind of newspaper family. His family owned like Newsday. Some of them were married to some people that were related to Guggenheim. But yeah, so the journalism thing did not seem to be an option, so she had to kind of go a different route. And she would end up working for Maine Senator Edmund S. Muskie and served on the National Security Council in the administration of President Jimmy Carter. And if you recall, that's actually kind of the same trajectory that Condoleezza Rice took. She was on the National Security Council as well, obviously years later. I think for Condoleezza Rice, it was in the 80s or in the late 70s. This is all happening in the 60s and early 70s. But she would actually end up getting divorced from her husband in 1982. But while they were married, they had 3 kids. I think 2 of them were twins. But after that, she would work on Republican presidencies, Ronald Reagan's presidency, as well as H.W. Bush, the father, old Papa. She worked for several nonprofit organizations and taught at Georgetown High School of Foreign Service. So we'll jump to the part where she gets confirmed as the first female Secretary of State, and she had, people, and what I was realizing when I was watching a lot of stuff about her, and it made me think, I'm not sure if this is even possible or something that people do, but I realized that some of the things that she had handled or had been that she had been aware of or been around, and people kind of looked at her career through the eyes of, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, certain events have been turned into movies, is what I'm trying to say. And what she was referring to different things that even I myself could really speak of through having watched the film version. She was talking about the Black Hawk Down, the movie, which she was talking about how the plane went down, that the helicopter went down to Somalia, and how that actually influenced their decisions when it came to dealing with the issues going on in Africa, specifically like stuff that was depicted in Hotel Rwanda. It was just, and she wasn't speaking this way, but when she was talking, all I was seeing was the actual like images of the movies that I had watched. So she had a lot to do. She did a lot while she was Secretary of State. She promoted the expansion of NATO eastward into the former Soviet bloc nations. She successfully pressed for military intervention under NATO during the humanitarian crisis in Kosovo in '99. She supported the expansion of free market democratization and the creation of civil societies in the developing world. She did a whole bunch of stuff. She's just, I was surprised, and I have a different opinion of her having watched a lot of interviews of her, because I think I was a lot younger when she was doing anything political. So she was more just, more of a punchline for me growing up. So I didn't know much about her. And you look at pictures of her, and you have one opinion, but then you listen to her interviews, and you really do find some compassion for her. She seems like a regular person. She is no longer with us. She died last year, March 23rd. So this is about a year since she died. She died at the age of 84 from cancer. A lot of people came out to her funeral. All the U.S. presidents that were alive were there, including former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, which I've always thought has one of the coolest names ever. If I could be renamed anything, name me Tony Blair. I mean, how is that guy not a movie star? Tony Blair. All right, that was another episode of Bite Size Bios, BSB, coming out every Monday at 4:30 a.m. This was number 26. We talked about Madeline Albright. I learned a lot about this woman. Didn't know much about her. Definitely, I mean, it's a little late now because she's dead, but I'm definitely a fan. Definitely a fan. Just hearing her talk, like I said, when you look at her face, and because that's all I can go off of as a younger person who's didn't witness a lot of her speeches or whatever like that, and hadn't listened to interviews. I can only go off what she looks like and what people say about her, And not everybody loved her, but then you look at her face and you're like, yeah, she didn't look like she had much to say, interesting to say. Then you listen to her, and she found out she actually did. Like I literally listened to an hour-long interview between her and Hillary Clinton, and was loving it, and was surprised. Not because I have anything issues with them, but I was just like, I didn't think it'd be worth listening to, and it totally was. So definitely, I hope if this sparked your interest about her and other female figures who have accomplished a lot. We've covered other ones. This will now be this is the third female Secretary of State we've covered on Bite Size Bios. We have covered, I think, all of them. We've covered now Madeline Albright, we've covered Condoleezza Rice, and we've covered Hillary Clinton. And we've done a number of first ladies too. We've done Michelle Obama, we've done Jackie O, and also Hillary Clinton. So I'm just kind of running the back catalog. If you want to go check it out, since now the episodes don't come out as frequently as they used to, but there's definitely a lot of content. Like I said, we are on episode 26 of Bite Size Bios, and 68, 69 of How Did That Happen? So there's a lot of stuff to go back. I'm telling you, we have covered so much. I can't always remember everything that we've done. Go back and check out a couple episodes. As always, if you like what you hear here, give us 5 stars wherever you find this. 2 stars if you don't want to. Please tell us why you didn't want to give us 5 stars, because constructive criticism is always welcome. We always appreciate hearing what you guys have to say. Any extras you'll find over at htthappen.com. You'll also find us on the socials at htthappen, which is mainly just Twitter and Instagram right now. And the Instagram is pretty tired looking. So just letting you know before you go. I think that's pretty much it before we get out of here. I don't think there's much else to say. I always appreciate you guys pressing play from week to week. I really do. I know I say it all the time, but I mean, without you guys, it's me just talking into air, which is basically still what it is, but nice to know someone listens to it after that. So thank you guys again, and we'll see you next week with the next How Did That Happen?
With Miller Mott College's online programs, you can choose when you study. Our online programs give you the flexibility to make education work with your schedule. Earn your degree without derailing your life. Visit us online at miller-mott.edu. That's miller-mott.edu.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.